Good evening. I'm Danny Gurry from Good Morning Frederick. We are live at 401 North Market Street in downtown Frederick. I am with Board of Education candidate Jamie Brennan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I think it's really important that whether you have a child at FCPS or not, to be an informed voter. So I'm trying to talk to as many candidates as possible leading up to our election, November 5th.
Yes.
And I really appreciate you saying yes, you would do it.
Oh, I love the opportunity. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I have some questions that a lot of the parents asked when I first kind of put out the call that I was going to be talking with some of the candidates. And so we'll go with them. And then my husband, Ash, is producing. So if you have any questions for Jamie, he will relay them to me, and then we'll go from there. All right, so first, just really a little background. Tell us about yourself.
So I'm a mom. I have two high schoolers. I'm a CPA by profession. I'm a former Board of Trustees member for Frederick Classical Charter School and a former acting treasurer for FCCS. And I've just really been interested in, education policy since I started trying to find good schools for my children, when they were starting preschool.
Yeah. The charter schools, tell me a little bit about that, because I know you guys were one of the first, right, here in Frederick County?
Yes, I think so. I was not. We didn't find Frederick Classical until they were around for about 3 years.
Okay, gotcha.
So we came in at about, I think my daughter got in year 4.
Okay.
So everybody else had already done all the work. I didn't even know what was going on. I would have happily participated.
Right.
But so yeah, our charter schools here in Frederick County are public charter schools. And what that means is that the funding is from the public school system. However, all of our staff, all of our our administrators, all our custodians, all of those people are regular FCPS employees. We don't pay private instructors or anything like that. So our teachers, if there weren't charter schools, they would be, absorbed right back into the existing system. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting.
And we're required to follow all of the same global policies that FCPS is required to, with regards to accommodations for students with special needs and all those kinds of things. If the difference, however, is that a board of trustees has kind of come up with a curriculum, and we've gotten that curriculum approved. It's got to be something sort of special and unique and different in some way. We've gotten that approved by FCPS, and then FCPS, provides us what used to be called the per pupil allocation. It's called something different in Blueprint, but in my head, it's still the per pupil allocation. So they provide us with that, and basically that's how we run the school. And they pay all their, they provide it to us. They largely pay our bills, is what it is, out of that budgeted amount.
Okay, very interesting. And that is we have a few charter schools here now, right?
We have 4.
Okay, there are 4. And those are filled through a lottery system?
Yes.
Okay, so parents who aren't maybe just finding out about this as well, parents who may be interested in getting their children into the charter school system, how does that work?
Each school has its own individual lottery, but so you should check out our charter schools. It's Carroll Creek, Monocacy Valley, both of those are Montessori. Frederick Classical Charter School is a classical charter school, and then we have Sibyllsville Environmental Charter School. Yeah, that's our newest. And so they'll all have slightly different dates and times for their lottery.
Okay.
But you just apply, and the lottery is usually done in the end of the spring. So
okay, interesting. This wasn't a chat about the charter schools, but I think since you were there, to be a Board of Ed member during this pivotal and contentious time in education.
Well, our Board of Education members are supposed to represent our community at large. And so we're supposed to draw from a diverse group of people with backgrounds, because our administration are our education experts. So I feel that having a background in business, having a background in accounting, those are positions we don't currently have anybody with a significant background. And a large part of our school, as we know, is a budget and managing the funds, dealing with complex issues like insurance and new construction and all of these things. And so I think it'd be very helpful to have somebody with a strong business background. And what makes me different too is that I've actually helped run, been a part of a team helping to run an FCPS school.
Right.
So I know what it's like to pick curriculum for a school. I know what it's like to approve staffing decisions, work on facilities issues, and all of those kinds of things. So I've gotten that experience, and it's all the same things we'd be asked to do on the Board of Education. We just did it on a smaller scale. So I actually have that experience, and I think that that's will be really helpful.
Yep. Okay, now I've got some kind of categories of questions that came through. One is on, this section is teachers. What is your stance, one of the parents asked, what your stance on teachers asking the public for assistance with purchasing necessary items for classrooms that the school system does not provide?
Well, I mean, I think it's ridiculous that our teachers have to go into their own pockets anyway to provide materials for the classrooms. I mean, I think that's completely unacceptable. It should be a budgeted line item, and each teacher should get a certain amount of money every year in order to do their class. And if they're not getting that enough money to do that, then we need to look at increasing that. I don't necessarily mind. I've seen those groups. I've participated in them. I don't necessarily mind the teachers say, hey, these are the kinds of needs I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I think we've all kind of gotten used to this sort of crowdfunding kind of way of life. So that doesn't bother me necessarily, but I wish that they didn't have to do it in the first place. And I don't think they should have to do it.
Yeah. And along that line, I think for me, I don't mind if they're doing specific things that are kind of outside pens and pencils and crayons and glue and those sorts of items. But I feel the same way. Let's see. Pay for teachers who are mandated to switch grades, classroom subjects in the middle of the summer. And I don't know what the parent meant by that, but there are a lot of times that you see a teacher who's always taught fourth grade is now suddenly teaching kindergarten, or vice versa, or going to the high school level, which I know they obviously have to be qualified to teach the subject. But I'm wondering what the thought process is for that behind.
Well, I mean, obviously we don't get rid of our staff, and we try to make sure that there's room for them to go into another position. So, if we had 4 first grades at one elementary school, and now the incoming class, we need 3 of them, we need one of those first grade teachers needs to go teach something else. And they might need to go to the second grade because now all those kids are going up, you know what I mean? So, but I think, I understand where this question's coming from a little bit, because obviously when you've taught the grade before, you have your lesson plans, you have things laid out, and so you're not spending all your summer, which is your time off, making up your new lesson plans, reviewing your new textbook. And so I do think if we're going to ask teachers to put in that extra time, specialty time over the summer, that we should, find some way of compensating them. And we have teachers that participate in all sorts of groups, working groups, textbook review groups throughout the summer that they were paid a stipend for participating in. And to me, this would be nothing different than that.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. Okay, yeah, you helped me understand that one. How do you feel we can attract and retain new teachers? This always seems to be an issue. We always seem to be competing with other counties. What are your ideas on that?
Well, so I hear a lot about, our compensation's less than other counties, but when we actually compare the compensation package as a whole, we're comparable. So to me, what people say then is that, look, I'm single, I'm 24. I don't care about your health insurance being, a platinum plan. Yeah. I can still be on my parents' plan for 2 years, you know what I mean? Yeah. So we need to maybe think about a way to make that attractive, maybe signing bonuses, to get people in the door, because, you're just coming out of college, an extra cash in your pocket is really probably what you would like to have.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of doing bonuses and then retention bonuses because it doesn't necessarily lock us into raises, which increases our step and the union. So I'd really like to see us utilize that more, some type of signing bonus that's paid out over a course of time or something, to make it reasonable and to make sure that they stay on board, which is typical in the industry and stuff.
The private sector uses it all the time.
Absolutely.
Referral bonuses to refer your friends
Yes,
to
yes.
apply, and then you got your
Yes.
friends working with you at least or whatever.
Yes.
And I agree because tax wise, you're not going to get your raise based on a salary that included a $10,000 up and all of that, where everything grows and the bottom line, the budget then grows. Yeah,
Right.
I like that.
So I mean, and then we have to work on making sure that we're the kind of system people want to work for. There's other things people make. You make your job choice based on other things other than just money. What is it? What's your work environment like? What are the hours? What are the time you're expected to participate all the time? So we need to make sure all that kind of stuff is comparable too, and that we're tracking it. But we also have to make sure we're doing like our research to home grow our own educators. You know what I mean? We have a lot of kids that go to college in Hood or the Mount, or in FCC, which obviously they need a 4-year degree to then become a teacher. But, what are we doing to keep them in our system? Do we have them come in as substitutes? Do we have them come in? Do we have some type of an internship plan, kind of thing that allows them to work maybe as aides in our school while they're finishing school and that sort of thing, to kind of get our people in and move them through our system? And I think that would be really useful.
Oh, that's a great idea too. All right, moving to students. Somebody wrote the comparison of elementary student achievement on MCAP. Now that teachers are forced to teach scripted curriculum versus the test score 3 to 4 years ago. Where do candidates stand on canned scripted curriculum that costs millions versus teacher autonomy? Do we not trust our teachers?
So they make a very good point about the canned curriculum costing us millions. When you look at the budget for a curriculum and construction committee or department, that budget has doubled over the last has almost doubled, I should say, over the last 5 or 6 years. Our students haven't doubled over the last 5 or 6 years. So what is that? That's a heavier reliance on canned curriculum, worksheets, workbooks, all that other kind of stuff. I absolutely do trust our teachers to make, they know what the standards are. And, if they want to use their own resources and use some other things to make sure that they're meeting those goals, I would rather see our team do that, even if we develop something internally as a system, as a basis to kind of, guidelines and that sort of thing for our teachers to use. I would like to see us do that rather than paying third parties. I mean, I think that that's completely ridiculous. We can certainly get there. I don't think we need to micromanage what happens in the classroom. I don't think that that's effective for the student, and I don't think that's effective for the teacher. But we are evaluated by those tests, and at some point we need some sort of objective measurement to say, how are we doing? So, but I think that any teacher is able to align what they're teaching with what the standard has to be. I mean, we've been doing this forever.
Right.
And I think that they're certainly capable of doing that. We should give them the resources to do it.
Well, and they talk about, I think a lot of the teachers' feedback that I hear is that it's so stressful because you have to try to cram in a lot of this information in a short period of time, depending, and really you are only teaching kids to test to get a score.
Right.
You're not actually teaching them the material. You're asking them to memorize stuff and do stuff like that. So, this is a big problem across the stance on student behavior issues in schools. There seem to be currently no consequences for disruptive, unsafe students. And there were probably 2 or 3 questions that pretty much all say the same thing, that there's no accountability for violence, rude and repetitive poor behavior, that bullying is on the rise, and what is the school board's role in that? I would say in all of these things with student issues, because they are at the school level, where does the Board of Education, do you feel, sits in helping the schools to really help the kids who are good kids, right?
Yes.
And not take all the focus off of the good kids, because you have to focus 100% of your attention on kids who are disruptive or unruly.
Well, so the board sets policy. So part of the policy is what are our discipline policies going to be? And if we've set a discipline policy and administration's executing that policy, then we got to make sure that as a board we have administration's back, right? So we can't have, a parent coming in and complaining and saying like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this different here, because then what's going to happen is a complete breakdown.
Yeah.
Because, we've got to make sure that as long as we're doing it without bias and fairly and uniformly, then our discipline policy should be something we're willing to stand behind. So that's one. Two is making sure that we are properly staffing our schools. A lot of the discipline problems come from, children that need more one-on-one, children that need to be in special classrooms, if there's not special classrooms, they're overwhelmed perhaps maybe in a gen ed classroom, and they need additional supports and are not getting it. So we've got to make sure that we're allocating our resources where we're supposed to be allocating our resources, and then we do need to look at the students that are repetitively causing disruptions, and then particularly those who are repetitively engaged, who are engaging in violence. And that's serious. I mean, that is disruptive for our entire school. It's disruptive to all of our children. It's disruptive to the learning of all the children in the school. And that's absolutely something that from a board position, we need to say, like, this is how we're handling this, and then insist that administration, handle that. And that's challenging because you have a lot of competing interests, but as long as the policy's fair and as long as it's done equally applied, then I think that we should stand behind our policy. I think we're a little gun shy because we are still under the DOJ consent decree, and I think that is leaving us to a far more permissive situation than we would be without that, because we are afraid to engage with the children, and we don't trust our methods. But that's also where we need to get back to training. If we're in a situation too where and that's a board policy, what training are we giving for de-escalation, for behavior modifications? What are we investing in that way in our staff?
Yeah.
And then we got to look at that.
Yeah. This is a big section for you, budget. One I know you have a lot of experience in and a lot of ideas. First of all, budget cuts. And this person asked, stance on future budget cuts, top down or bottom up? Number one, just the budget itself, it's almost $1 billion. And I don't, like you said earlier, I don't think our school kids have grown at the pace in which the budget is growing. So for those people who say, but don't all the new home constructions have to pay into this, and where is all that money going, et cetera, et cetera? What is your stance on the budget itself, and if there has to be a cut, where does it come from?
So, well, one, new school construction is capital projects, and that's not on our $1 billion budget. That's its own budget. And that, unfortunately, is heavily tied in with some weird funding models we get from the state, which limit how much kind of extra room we can build a school. That's why when our schools come online, they're almost already over capacity, because we're not allowed to say oh, we expect another 200 students at this school, and let's build a school with maybe a third floor that we're not occupying yet. We can't do that. And that would make sense because we know those kids are coming, but the Maryland funding model doesn't allow for us to build in that extra classroom space, so we're kind of stuck with what we get. So that's one thing, and that is the impact fees and that sort of thing. And do I think that they've been enough? No, absolutely not. There is some conflict too, because we've had a lot of new housing units come online in Frederick City, and people pay impact fees to Frederick City. But those impact fees don't necessarily find their ways to Frederick County, because obviously we don't have, it's not like Baltimore City, so we don't have Baltimore City schools, and we don't have Frederick City schools and Frederick County schools. All of our students are Frederick County students, and so
we do double pay in the city.
Right.
But we pay,
But how are those impact fees making their and there's some conflicts I've heard that they're not necessarily flowing over. So that's a whole other animal. But with the budget cuts, this is another thing that, our budget has actually increased year over year. Our per student cost of our system increased again this year. And we got more, so we didn't really need to cut, and we don't have less money. We actually have more money in our budget this year than we had last year. More money per student as well. So part of this is administration. We almost have more non-teachers on our payroll and CPS than we have teachers. Okay, and so how is that? What are we doing with that? A lot of it, our administration costs has well outpaced both student increase and inflation. So we're adding positions at the administration level, which is money right out of our classroom pockets. So we need to look at that. So yes, I'm a top down. Other systems like comparatively Carroll County, for instance, which is a smaller system to ours, but their overhead is much lower than ours. Now we should actually have a lower overhead per student cost, right? Because we should get some economies of scale. But they actually have a lower overhead cost per student than we have, which is just an indication that we've allowed our administration to get too much.
Yeah.
And we're not using those tax dollars wisely.
Yeah. Well, you kind of already touched on this one. How do candidates hope to assist older buildings in being competitive regarding new technology with our new buildings? Is that more capital?
That's more the capital money, and we do keep pushing back some of these older buildings. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I know that the families in Brunswick are very concerned about what that school is
that's like a health risk.
Yes,
actually.
I mean, I agree.
It's not even like it is a health risk.
I agree. So, we shouldn't have the useful life of our buildings be 90 years old. I mean, and that's what we're talking about when you look at actually the schedule of how long they expect these things to go. Part of that though is budgeting, because what we do not do sufficiently is basically budget a sinking fund. We build new things and then we don't budget to actually adequately keep them up and to maintain them. We do for our maintenance, and our maintenance department, fantastic, and those people know how to stretch a dollar. So it isn't on our routine maintenance, but our upgrades. We don't necessarily plan well to upgrade our buildings. We get them online, but the reality is commercial space and our buildings are essentially commercial space. I mean, they're used in that manner.
Yeah.
A commercial space is, the useful life of that is about 30 years.
Yeah.
And then you've basically got it and redo it is the idea behind, how that works typically in industry. And so we should be working that into our plans, but we don't, and that's mismanagement.
That is, yeah. How about accountability to the taxpayer? Like a line item budget or something that the average person can just understand.
Yes.
This money's coming in and here's where it's going out.
Yes.
Why is it so convoluted?
It's convoluted so that they can hide where the money goes. I mean, this is the bottom line. And it's easier for them, right? Because for anybody who doesn't know the difference between what our standard budget practices is, what did we spend last year, and then how much of an increase do we need this year? What we should do is what's called zero-based budgeting, which is where you start with everybody gets zero, and now you have to justify what it is that what you need for the next year. And that's a much harder budget process. That means everybody's digging into all the numbers. That means you look at what third parties are we buying curriculum from? Can we get this cheaper? Do we need to have these workbooks? Is anybody actually using these workbooks? Are we like my kids chucking them, at the end of the school year with only 10 pages completed? You know what I mean? So these are where we need to dig in the budget. And look, I mean, I'm not accusing, this is not meant to be accusatory, but in any budget, when you are talking close to $1 billion, there is no way that you do not have waste, fraud, and abuse. There's not any way that we don't have duplicate spending in there. There's not any way that we are not paying some vendor for a license that expired 3 years ago that we never, those things happen in all entities. That happens everywhere. And so, taking a fine-tooth comb and seeing line by line. I think we should disclose what vendors we pay.
Yes.
I've had to go back and ask for information. I've done PIA requests. I've had other board board members have done similar things and asked. It is very hard to get out of them, like, how much did you spend with this, company? And another thing too, budget wise, is a lot of our budget comes from grants we get from the federal or state government and all these other things, for a specific thing, to institute a specific policy or use a specific program or like, whatever. What we don't do, which I have never seen, which we absolutely should do, is a cost benefit analysis, a full cost benefit analysis of those grant monies. Because if we're taking a grant, we're going like, oh, we have $300,000, but it's going to cost us $400,000 to fully implement the thing that we just got the grant money from, or we then have requirements to meet for years after we have no more grant money. That's a problem. But we don't do that analysis, and I think that we really need to do that.
Yeah. One thing I don't like about any governmental system is that the knowledge or the fear that if you don't spend your budget, you're not going to get it. My thing should be the private sector's way, which is if you come in under budget, everybody gets a pizza party, or everybody gets the bonus, or everybody shares in the wealth. Somehow that actually turns around in a positive. You're incentivizing people to save money. You're incentivizing people to be wiser with that dollar. That just drives me crazy, that thought.
Yeah, I mean, I just really dislike that too. I mean, and you see that. You see that come around.
Oh, I've had friends say it's June 18th. Right. I've got 2 weeks to spend $4,000.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm not going to get it next year.
Right.
Which is so dumb. If you did everything you needed to do and you came in 4,000 under, you should be championed. Because who knows what's going to happen next year.
Right. Or if there's a thing that you need to spend the money on and say like, okay, it just hasn't hit until next year for some reason. Hey, but I planned for it to happen this year. It's not hit until next year. Then make that be part of the budget for next year. Say like, look, we didn't spend this. Don't lower my budget by this because that's really going to hit July. Yeah, you know what I mean? And we don't do that.
And I think you kind of already alluded to this, but one of the questions, will you shrink the number of people employed at central office and move those resources to the classroom?
I mean, that's what we should do.
Yeah.
We do. We have a lot of people in the central office, and that's an inefficient use of our funds.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yeah. When there is a budget shortfall, what you already kind of talked about top down, but like you just think like if you started just in central office and started to look through stuff, you feel that there would be lots of money there.
I think we could come up with if we just, used our money more efficiently.
All right, transportation. This is a hot button topic because there's a shortage.
Yes.
I heard 2 weeks ago there were 30 routes in Frederick County that were not being driven by a bus that needed a bus. Well, I mean, that's ludicrous. That means families are getting calls saying, sorry, you got to get your kids away to school. That's public school's biggest benefit, I think, is that your child will be driven.
Getting on the bus and
getting on and off safely.
Yeah. What
are your thoughts about how to fix this issue? And I know it's not really a Board of Education. It's not something that falls under your purview, right?
No, but they fund it and they get updates on it. So, part of it obviously is compensation. That's a big part of it. Part of it is we don't have, just in general, the industry for CDL drivers is short. So if you have a CDL and your choice is to like make an easy run every day, driving some, cargo, or drive a bunch of, 40 screaming children around, I can see why people would choose the alternative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we need to make it attractive. The split schedule is really hard for a lot of people. We don't pay them for downtime in between. So like they basically work like 6 hours, but ties up most of their day. Some people do go do something else and come back and, so we either got to figure out a way to like maybe offer up some part-time positions so somebody could take just a morning route, so we could take just an evening route, that might be doing that within their other job, basically working us as a second job. But we really poo-poo the whole, part-time. That's a huge part of our staffing problem. is that we are not really open to a lot of part-time employment. And I think that that's a big problem overall. Because there's a lot of people who would say like, well, I want to work 2 or 3 days a week, but I'm not working 5 days a week, because I have these other things, or it's not enough money, or I have people to take care of, or I have daycare issues or whatever my own. So, but just back to the CDL issue, we have that, but it's also, it's a stressful job. And so I think what we need to do is one, start enforcing some behavior issues on these buses. I hear from bus drivers who like, the behavior is out of control of the bus, just like it is in the classroom, and they can't get these kids off their bus. And it's unsafe, you don't want this driver being, But so we also probably need to put aides on buses too, so there's an adult who's not in charge of driving the bus, who's in charge of disciplining on the bus, Yeah. So I think we need to do that to help make it more competitive and attractive as well.
Yeah. All right, just some general questions. Class sizes, it seems that as soon as they say there's a budget shortfall, we're gonna make some cuts, it means increasing students in classrooms. What do you feel like needs to happen in the schools when there is with class sizes?
Well, again, I really think that comes from central office, but part of our class size issue is not necessarily budget cuts, although you always hear that being used as a reason. Sometimes it's physically we do not have the classroom size. We do not have the space for another classroom, even if we wanted to have the other, another class, what I mean? And so that ends up impacting how many students we're trying to shove into a classroom. I think personally optimal class size is about 20 students in the younger grades. And then, 20 to 25 maybe. And then depending though, like we have like AP classes, like those kids are going to be going to college next year and sitting in classrooms with 500 other kids. So with 20, is it 20, 30, how much, if they're good students and they're going to sit there and listen, you know what I mean? It's no harder to talk to 30 than it is to talk to 10. So I do think that we need to, focus on class size, but it's not always a budget thing. It's also a space thing. And that's a part of the problem too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see. One question was, how do candidates feel about FCPS calendar being so vastly different than all surrounding counties with different start times, different holiday breaks? Why can't it be consistent?
I would like it to be more consistent personally. I was a huge proponent of going back to school after Labor Day. I love that. It didn't bother me personally to get out later in the summer because I really, to me, the end of summer is Labor Day, and so that wasn't such a big deal. But I understand with sports and other things, I really do think that we should somewhat more closely mirror our neighboring counties. And for the last several years, I've actually spoken up against the calendar they've chosen. And one of the things they always said was the reason why they do it is to align with FTC's calendar, because we have so many dual enrollment kids. And this year I had a dual enrollment kid, and he went to school at FCC a whole week after FCPS started. So we aren't really aligning with them either. So I don't know why we're so out of sync, but we absolutely should be, more in sync with our neighbors.
Yeah. Let's see. This was a big one that came up recently. Sports fees. So when my kids were in FCPS schools, which was just in 2021 and 2023, they both graduated. It was $95 per sport, which meant if you had a 3-sport child, you were paying $300 for them to participate during the year. And my involvement with boosters and fundraising at the booster level at TJ High School, I realized or found out that majority of that money actually goes to FCPS central office. The school only keeps a small portion of it. And then the same thing with the gated ticket collection. Most of that goes to FCPS. There are a couple of things from this. First of all, I don't know how a parent can afford $205 for that. That is crazy. That's more than doubled in just a couple of years. But secondly, now they've moved the entire system to not cash. So you have a lot where this comes in the play of the haves and have-nots in our county. You have schools that get 1,000 people that come watch their sporting events no matter what. They're getting a lot of money from that. You have schools, city schools like TJ and Frederick High, for instance, that might get 30 or 40 people who come because the rest can't afford it. And they're not also getting the benefit of those dollars with their athletic directors. Where can this, what are the solutions that you see? Again, understanding this is kind of like you're on the outside of this, but certainly it's impacting a lot of families.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the increase to fees was ridiculous and too dramatic. I mean, a modest increase in fees. I mean, everything goes up, but that's harder on our like working families too. So, you know, I think in a perfect world we wouldn't have to pay anything for our kids to participate in sports, and we are already paying taxes. So I really don't think that we should even have any. But I haven't had a chance to, you know, find out what the rationale is on that from the board. But my position is I don't really think we should pay anything, and if we are, it should be nominal. And I don't think parents should be paying to come watch their kids play a sport. If you want to, you know, do a little fundraising off the kids who are going to come in to watch their friends or boyfriends and girlfriends, and you know, like the whole social thing of that, they would have paid $5 to go to a dance. They'd pay you know what I mean? They paid that to go to the movies. Like, you know, that's okay. But for a parent to have to come watch their children or bring a sibling or whatever, and then they're paying for, you know, a couple kids, that's not cool. We need to evaluate that and figure out how to make that in the budget. But also, we don't leverage relationships with our business partners. You know, when you go to some other schools, there are advertisements for business partners. There, you know, there's community partners, not just business, like people in our community. And sure, like maybe they'll put their sign up and they pay the money, and now these kids don't have fees. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how. These are things that we should look at doing, because these are things that other schools do. This is things that colleges do, you know, and those sorts of things. And just try to work with our community partners and see, like, hey, somebody sponsor this. Can we have like a sports sponsorship? Can we, you know? And I bet you there's a lot of people in the community who would give if asked, but
Right.
they don't know about the need.
Yeah, that's a good point too. School safety, obviously a big issue in today's society. Thankfully, here in Frederick County, we've been very lucky. What are your thoughts on trying to keep our schools as safe as possible, even with some threats that were found to be not real? It still causes a lot of, you know, nervousness in our population. What do you think we can be doing?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I think the sheriff's office does a really good job of following up on leads when things are said and mentioned online and things like that. So we definitely want to continue to make sure that they're doing that, and I know that they will, and that we're feeding them information and intel as appropriate, and then, you know, we continue to impress upon our kids and, you know, students to say, like, look, see something, say something, people are talking about this, make sure you report it, and all those kinds of things. So we get, you know, people are actively making threats. I think having SROs in all of our schools right now, they kind of just float around and feeder patterns and things like that. Sheriff Jenkins, again, does a really good job trying to make sure that we have SROs, like, you know, maybe they'll drive by, swing by, not SROs, but just his regular, his staff, just to cruise by, park in the school parking lot to have their lunch, you know what I mean? Just have a presence. But I think, you know, we need to really consider expanding our SRO program. The most recent school shooting, that was stopped with an armed SRO, you know, and I think that that's something we really need to consider, making sure that we have, you know, school resource officers in more of our schools for a full day and that sort of thing, rather than having to split their time between a feeder pattern.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think really you leave it to the experts in that, and then hopefully we can get that covered as well. All right, we already talked about information on the budgets being more transparent. How about Board of Education being involved in the promotion of trade schools, apprenticeships, military careers with the same vigor as college?
Oh, I mean, that's a huge part of my platform. My son is finished his 2 years with the HVAC program at the Career Technology Center, and I think there's nothing better for our kids to go and learn real skills. These kids that come out of our Career and Technology Center, they they are actually heads and tails above their peers in many ways. When you talk to them, they look you in the eye, they know how to shake hands, they have a confidence about them that some of our other students don't, because they actually know how to do something, and they know how to do things that their parents don't know how to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is a huge, that gives them a huge confidence boost and really prepares them. So I think there's nothing better than that. We actually turn away about 50% of our kids who apply, and that's disgraceful. So we investing in that and making sure that all the kids who apply can get a seat, maybe not in their preferred program, but they can get in their top 3, is a huge issue of mine. I think that it's so important. And the reality is, not every child wants to go to college or is cut out to go to college, or maybe they're very cut out to go to college, but they're just not emotionally ready to go to college. Like, let them go work, find out what they really like, and then there's so many options with college now, online, at night, whatever. Like, college doesn't have to be going right out of school for 4 years. So I think that, promoting our trades, promoting internship programs. I mean, I have a lot of issues with the blueprint, and I don't think that a lot of that stuff is good, or workable. But I do like the emphasis it's putting on making sure that our kids are career and workforce ready, and they're not. We're currently sending kids out in the workforce who are not prepared, and we hear that from our employers all the time. So, I think it's hugely important.
Yeah. Well, I think you've answered all the questions that we got from parents. Now, as I did last time, I would love to just give you the floor for as long as you like, just to kind of remind people why on November 5th they should be marking your name on the ballot.
Well, as I said in my opening, that I am the only candidate who's running who actually has experience running a school from all aspects of it: facilities, budget, curriculum, staffing. So I can hit the ground running with information that I have learned and already spent time knowing how to do. I think too that our board is supposed to represent a diverse background of people with different backgrounds and specialties and skills, because it is a position that's not necessarily focused on teaching. We're not teaching from the board. We are helping to manage a system. And so the managerial experience, business experience, I think that that's so important for our board. And we currently don't have that. We're really lacking on that. So I think that making sure that we have people with those varied skills is very important. And then finally, we need advocates for parents. We have lots of advocates in our system for teachers. We have the teachers union, we have administration, but we need people to represent families and represent parents and make sure that the parents have a voice within our school system. And so I'm a huge parental rights advocate. I believe that, parents are the primary educators of their children. They should have first say in everything with their children. And so we want to make sure that our system is responsive to parents, and making sure that we're not cutting parents out of decisions, making sure that we're deferring to parents. And so I think too, many times, parents feel like they're not being heard. They're asking for services with our special needs department and other things, and they feel blown off. And so I think having a parental rights advocate on the board, being there for parents, is really important. And I think that I could be that person.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate it. And is it Brennan for BOE?
Brennan for board.
BrennanforBoard.com. You can find out more about Jamie's platform, where she may be next. And you can support her if you choose to do so. But on November 5th, she would like your vote. We thank you guys so much for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. on Good Morning Frederick.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny.